So I thought, hey, let's take part 4 before we begin a new series next Sunday, and let's just dive into some questions about the material we've covered. And I know that you have some questions, and I've been doing, this, what I do, whatever it is I do, right, for close to 30 years. And I know people have questions, but sometimes we're a little intimidated to ask those questions because we're afraid that, nobody else has this question, and if I ask this question, then I'm going to sound stupid, or I'm going to sound ignorant, or I'm going to sound shallow, or whatever. What I've learned is almost every question is floating around in the minds of 10 or 12 other people. And almost everybody's afraid or embarrassed or intimidated to ask it. So we are going to begin with some questions that we already have. And then Bill is right here, and he's got a mic. And if we get some time, hopefully we'll have a little time, we'll entertain a live question somebody might have about the material we've covered. Now, I know that there are a few of you here in the room, this is your first time here at Forest Park, and you're thinking, does this happen all the time? No, it doesn't happen all the time. This is somewhat rare that we're sitting down and just going to have a conversation about the series we just finished up. But it is something that I'm wanting to do more and more of. And the reason why is because I want feedback from you. I want to know what you're thinking. I want to know maybe an area of confusion you might have about something we've said. I want to know that you understand, and are able to walk out the truth of what we're presenting on Sunday mornings. It's not enough for you to come and just sit, listen to a lecture, and leave. I mean, there's some power in that, and there's some life change in that. But the real change comes when you're able to internalize what's been said, and you're able to put it into practice on Monday. Because it's somewhat easy, and I don't know that easy is the right word, to worship and to feel and to be excited when you're sitting in a room filled with other people who are doing the same thing. It's when you get in your truck tomorrow morning, it's when you get in your car tomorrow morning and you go to that office and you're with those people, right? The difficult ones. You're not difficult, they're difficult, right? And it's how do you carry out what you heard on Sunday on Monday? How do you live it out at home like you're living or trying to live it out, or at least feeling as if you're living it out at church? That's the goal. So we're going to do more of these throughout 2020. You're always open. I'm invited to ask questions. I'm always wanting that. You can email me, Facebook me, stop me in the hall, buy me lunch, and ask me several questions. One question's free, 2 questions require some level of coffee, lunch, something like that. So anyway.
Bribery.
Bribery, that's right. So anyway, that's what we're doing today, all right? And I really appreciate your investment today being here. Here's how I want to do the format. I want to just somewhat recap each part of the series, and then we have a couple questions from each part. And Lana's going to jump in and help me answer these questions. I want her because she has a different angle. I have an angle, she has the right angle. I have an answer, she has the correct answer. But she's here to bounce some of that off as well. So I'm going to recap part 1, and then she's going to read a couple questions that we already have pre-selected here, okay? The first part of Anthem of Hope was called For Losers Only. And here's what we said in that part. We said, hope is easier to give than receive. Many of us sitting in this room, many people watching online, have lost hope. You've lost hope because you're stuck at some level in your pain, in your disappointment, in your failure. Things from your past, things you're currently doing, things you're afraid that you may do again, and you're just stuck, you're spinning. A few of us, however, are more than just feeling the effects of our pain or our failure. We have become almost numb, and we're merely existing. We get up, we go to work, we come home. We get up, we go to work, we come home. Or we get up and go to school and come home. And 2 difficult truths we talked about during that message is that broken people attract broken people. It's why we are surrounded by so many people who have no idea how to help us. Because when we're stuck, we often attract other people who are stuck. And then our entire social sphere is filled with broken, hurting, stuck people. And after a while, the pain becomes normal. Jesus encountered a paralyzed man who had been sitting at a pool for 38 years, had nobody to help him get better, nobody to help him up. Jesus told him to get up. Get up. Why? Jesus infused the man with hope, and he reminded him that he's not invisible and that he would never be the same after today, because once he encountered Jesus, everything changed. And then we ended that message by asking a question, and that was, what would your life look like if flying above your life was a flag that said hope? Not the labels people attach to you, not addict or divorcee or liar or fat or unemployed or whatever else that people want to attach to your life. But what if flying above your life was the word, the banner, the anthem of hope? So that was part one. It was a great message. The pastor did a super job. And if you missed it, you missed a lot. So anyway. All right, so we have a couple questions about that part, and let's jump into that.
Okay, so you talked about hope, that it's easier for us to give hope to another person a lot of times than for us to receive hope. And for us to receive something that's going to encourage us, it's easier to give. And we kind of focus on giving and giving. And so as a result of that, we still are stuck in our own pain. And so can you talk a little bit more about what stuck kind of looks like and why we remain in pain when it seems as if we would do things that would encourage us to step away from pain, but we just stay in the middle of that pain?
Yeah. I think the answer to that is probably as varied as there are people. The reason why is because each of us have our reasons that we got into the mess that we're in, and we have reasons as to why we stay in the mess we're in. I wish that I could give you one answer and that would fit all people and say, hey, here's the reason you're stuck, and if you do these 3 things, you'll get out and you'll be fine. But in my experience in working with people and counseling and preaching and teaching and all these different things, I find that, it's almost like a combination lock. You got to almost get all the numbers right to really walk out and be completely free. So there are emotional reasons, there are spiritual reasons, there are sometimes relational reasons, even physical reasons as to why we get ourselves in the mess we're in and why we remain in the mess we're in. A lot of times we remain stuck because we just do not, at the core of our being, believe that life can be different than it is. I can really speak from my own perspective. There were a number of years I just did the best I could to accept that I am who I am, and I probably will never be any better. Now, on the outside, and you've heard me teach this before, I projected an image of confidence. I projected an image of spiritual maturity. I projected an image of love for God, which is easy to do. It's very, very easy to fake all that. And if you grow up in church, you're taught how to fake.
Talk a bit about how damaging it is to a person's mind and heart when all they do is fake because they're stuck.
Oh yeah, if you remain in that place for a length of time, you begin to kind of mold yourself into that particular person that you're believing you are. Yesterday, Lana and I had an opportunity to go and do a light teaching to some couples in a marriage seminar. And one of the things that Lana said during her time, and then it really triggered something inside of me, is that we often have these stories we tell ourselves, these narratives that we tell ourselves. And you got to be very, very careful about the story you tell yourself, because your narrative eventually becomes your reality. And if you begin to tell yourself, I'm really a loser, I'm really never going to achieve anything, at the beginning it's just something you say, but eventually that becomes your world, and you literally become that. Your reality is molded to that. So staying stuck and telling yourself you're never going to accomplish anything, you're always going to remain in the pain, unfortunately that 6 months becomes a year, becomes 10 years, and your entire life is wrapped up in that.
And I've found that in 2020, the world that we live in now, because of all of the influence of social media, is that people stay stuck, I think sometimes because they're looking towards a social construct to feel better about themselves, so that they will post, whatever it is that will elicit the most attention. Well, at the same time, they start to believe that all of the things that are provided back to them in that social scenario are truth. And then when they wake up and realize that people are not thinking about them nearly as much as that post was not attributed to them, or that this person received all of these accolades and they received none, it causes their world to crash. And I think that causes a sense of being stuck in someone's life, and it's very difficult. I think our world has fed into being stuck.
Yeah.
Not just our past, but what our current looks like now.
Yeah, there's some recent studies done on just the emotional effect social media has on people. They've done studies where they, test a group of people before they spend time on social media to evaluate the level of their happiness and their peace and their contentment. And then after they spend an hour or so on social media, they test them again. And consistently, the amount of happiness is lowered, the amount of contentment is lowered. We look into other people's lives and we think that they've got it together, and then we compare what they portray on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and then we compare it to our life, and we think we don't have it together like they have it together, but you don't even realize they're faking too, but it affects us emotionally. And we're constantly looking almost like we think we're looking through a window into their real life. We're not. We're looking into a picture that they've contoured,
so
that they've created.
Narratives to keep
absolutely.
us stuck.
Absolutely.
You also talked about the paralyzed man, that for 38 years that he sat at that pool, and what he believed was that an angel was going to come, stir the water, and then he would be healed. Was that true? Was an angel actually going to come down, stir the water?
No, I don't think that's true. I think that was a legend. It was a myth. It was folklore that he had bought into. A lot of the people had bought into that an angel would come, stir the water, and then the first person who could get into the water would be miraculously healed. The second person, there's no hope for you.
That's so sad.
Yeah, the third person, no hope for you. Well, for 38 years, this man waited for an angel to stir the water. Now, there are reasons as to why the water would appear as if it had been stirred by an angel. Could have been a spring underneath it. There could have been some kind of current that would cause the water to move. And people began to think that an angel came down and, grabbed a big spoon or something and stirred the water, and then he could get healed. And I love that story, and I love this question because it speaks into the amount of myths, legends that people have told us that causes us to be stuck in our pain. And because we believe it, we never experience freedom. When Jesus meets the man, he just looks at the man and says, "Get up." And I think to myself, did that man have the ability to get up for a long time? What if he would have said, "You know what, I don't need an angel to stir the water. God, I need you. Speak into my life. God, set me free. God, raise me up." I don't know. I don't know the answers to that, but I do know that when Jesus looked at the man, he didn't say to the man, "Hey, look, I'm going to heal you because you have great faith," or "I'm going to heal you because you've lived a holy life," or "I'm going to heal you because you've sat here for 38 years and you've earned it." No, he just looks at the man and says, "Get up. Get up." How many myths, how many legends, how many things have people told us that's keeping us bound where we are? And if somehow we could move that stuff aside, and the narratives other people have given to us, the stories other people have told us, and it could be, "You will never amount to anything." And you begin to live out, "I will never amount to anything. You will always be behind your brother," or "You will, I wish you could be more like your sister," or "You are just like your dad. He is this," and typically that's a negative thing. You're just like your dad. Normally it's not. "And he's so good looking and successful," and typically it's "You're just like your dad," meaning stubborn, or have an addictive personality, or mean, or angry, or whatever. And we begin to believe that narrative, and it surrounds our life and keeps us sitting by a pool, waiting for some miracle to occur, waiting for something beyond us to happen. And I know that there are people sitting in this room, I know there are people watching online who their mother fed them a lie, their father fed them a lie, a husband, a wife, a coach, a teacher, a girlfriend, or whomever it may be, fed you a lie, and you believe it about yourself, and you are stuck, and you are spinning. And you need, through all of that, God to speak to you, call your name, and say, get up. Get up. Quit waiting on the angel. And the man also blamed not only an angel, basically, he didn't blame the angel. He just said, when the angel comes and stirs the water, I don't have anybody to put me into the water. So one, it's the angel's fault. He ought to come more often than once every now and then. Two, it's the people around me. It's their fault because nobody picks me up and carries me in. In other words, it's not my fault, it's what's happened to me. It's not my fault, it's the things around me. Again, myth, legend, none of that true. Get up. And the man gets up and his entire life is changed that day when he encounters Jesus. So what I would love to see happen in Forest Park, in your life, and the people at home watching and all this, is for you to break through all those excuses, move all that stuff out of the way, look Jesus in the eye, and just like Peter did, this is a whole other story we won't get into, but Peter did in the boat, can I come to you? And almost every time you say, can I come? Almost every time, if not every time, Jesus says, sure, come on, get up. Come on, let's go. So you don't have to have, you're not dependent on an angel and friends and all these other things. You can stand up.
I think another myth that sometimes we believe or that we hear that people will say, there's a reason for everything. You'll be glad that this happened to you.
Yeah.
You'll see how much that you learned from it. Your life, you feels like it's being destroyed. And someone will say, well, there's purpose in your pain. And all of that is true. But the purpose and the lesson learned is how we respond to it. It's how that we respond to our life falling apart, is the choices and the decisions that we make after that trauma that will set us apart from, are we able to walk away or are we staying stuck in that?
Yeah, a lot of, that's so good, because a lot of us have this image of God that somehow he caused or allowed this terrible tragedy to occur to us because he has some special, unique purpose for our life, and therefore he allowed us to go through this or that. You say, well, what's so wrong with that? Well, if you were raped and you somehow think, because people have told you, that God allowed you to be raped because he has some great plan for your life, that inserts this little, I always just say a little chip, little, software, it kind of gets in your head, that God did that. He caused that. If your parents died early, or a brother was taken away, or died, or whatever. I believed that for a number of years. I'm not going to get into all the different things that I've experienced. If you've been here, you know some of the story of childhood and what I talked about last Sunday morning with some sexual molestation and those things. For a long time, I was told, and this came through Sunday school, it came through sermons, it came through some people in my life I looked up to be spiritual mentors. I believed, based on what they told me, that my father left, that my mother made some decisions that were difficult, that brought some difficulty in my life, that I had some abuse that happened, and I could go down a long list. All of those things, God wanted to happen in my life because he wanted to use me to do great things and needed these things to happen in me to break me down, to teach me lessons, these different things. So when you're standing in church at 25 or 30 and the minister says, let's raise our hands and worship our Father who loves us. And in the back of my head, I'm thinking, I would never do to my kids what God did to me. Because I believed for a long time that God did that to me. He allowed those things. He looked at me and said, Scott's special, so let's break his heart by letting his dad walk out on him. You see, that's a myth, that's a legend, and it kept me stuck for a long time. And I'm going to tell you, it's now maybe you are so much further down the road than me with this, and I don't say that facetiously. It's very possible because we can all be in different places in maturity. But it was very, very difficult for me to believe that God loved me like a father, that he cared for me, that he had compassion for me, when almost everything else in my life did not seem to say that to me. And it wasn't really until I was probably in my mid-30s before that began to crack and it began to fall away. And I'm going to tell you, probably 10 years ago, I went through a very difficult time spiritually, and an image that I had of God for a long time cracked and fell away. And you would think, well, that was a good thing. No, it was a very traumatic thing, because for 40 years I worshiped, or at least I thought I worshiped, an image of God that was really off base. And when your God dies and you go through Friday to Sunday before the resurrection, you're in a tough place. Those disciples were in a tough place when Jesus was put in that tomb. Sunday's coming, but Saturday is a long day. And for a long time I lived in Saturday. So myths, legends, lies, and some of you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay.
That's good.
I'll
All right,
summarize.
you're going to do it? All right.
Yeah, part 2.
What that means is you're talking too much, and I want to get this
When
shorter.
wills collide. The vast majority of people do not have life figured out. So when wills collide, whose will?
Our will, God's will clashing, people's will and our will clashing, our own two different desires inside of us battling for one another.
Okay. And so the vast majority of people, we don't have life figured out, and we're managing the best that we can. And a few of us are in very deep pain. We're struggling with regret, the effects of abuse, affairs, marriage problems, all kinds of stuff. And so you said that almost all struggles arise from one of 3 tensions. And tension between God and me, which points to the vertical relationship, tension between others and me, pointing to the horizontal relationship, and then tension between me and me, internal. And so just kind of take us through that, where that message kind of came from, and the premise of that.
Well, James, the brother of Jesus, talks about why it is that we struggle so much and why we have such arguments and tension. And it's because, God wants something and we want something, and they're often different. A friend or our father or mother or a neighbor or whatever wants something, and we want something, and it's different. And then sometimes we even have competing desires inside of us, and they wrestle. James says that all arguments and conflicts and all these different things arise because there's something we want and we can't have. And the reality is, you can be a 60-year-old mature man or woman sitting in this room, and you can take a 3-year-old, and in a lot of ways we're not a whole lot different. It's just that the thing that we want is more expensive, and it's a little bit more complicated. He wants a cookie, you want a new truck. Okay? He wants a sippy cup, and you want another person. And the conflict arises when the thing we want is either in opposition to God's will, it's in opposition to someone else's will, or we don't even know what we want. So all that conflict arises, the vertical, the horizontal, and the internal, comes from the same place. And
then you kind of shared as far as the way to alleviate of those struggles. The formula, that you gave us was confess and repent.
Yeah, if the tension's here,
vertical.
If the tension's here, then the 2 words that I gave were confess and repent. So if we've got a tension before God and we're conflicting with His will, we need to stop and just confess that. Be open and honest about, God, there are things you want, I don't want. There are things I want, you don't want me to have. It's confession, it's coming clean. And then repenting is turning from that, your way, what you want, and saying, God, the truth is, even though my emotions want it, even though my flesh, my body wants it, even though my will wants it, it's contrary to your will, and I need to turn direction. I need to walk toward truth rather than walk toward what I want. So confess and repent.
And the relationships, obviously, that we have that are most right before us, because it's relationships with one another, that when we have struggles there, that's where we seem to stay in front of us most of the time, when we have disagreements with one another. And what was the strategy that you gave us with that, and what advice would you really share in regards to difficult relationships?
Yeah, the 2 words I gave for the horizontal tension was confront and release. Confront means that you might have to go to the person who's caused you pain, and you might have to confront them. It could be a mom, it could be a dad, it could be a friend. I think we don't want to go there sometimes. A lot of us sitting in this room just hope. We're hopeful that if we don't say anything, it'll go away. He abused me when I was a kid, but I've never confronted him about it. I've never dealt with it. No, it's possible that you can't confront the person. Either they've passed on, maybe it is so painful, this person is such an abusive person in your life, by even talking to the person will stir up so much emotion and pain you just can't do it. And sometimes you're the one that caused the pain. So you might have to go and confront in the sense that I need to apologize. I need to work this out. I've changed now. Maybe your life has been completely turned upside down with following Christ, and now you need to confront the pain you've caused. So confrontation could be internal. And then release has to do with once you confront the person, you need to release them from that hold. Another word for that is what? Forgiveness. So we are to forgive. How often? 70 times 7. Over a period of a life? No, that's in one day. Okay? So there's a lot of forgiveness. So we need to confront and release. And then if you're the perpetrator, there may need to be confrontation in the sense that you confront your own sin, you confront your own pain you've caused, you go to them, you confront them, you apologize, and release might have to do with you. You might have to release yourself from the condemnation and the guilt and the things that you've held inside.
I know for me personally that I seek for closure. And that might be something that you guys kind of identify with, is that if something has happened, you want to deal with it, you want to confront the situation, whatever's happening, but then at the same time, you want to close the door on that so that you can move on into growth, into other relationships, into whatever it is that you're dealing with. But there are some things that I've had to realize in my life that will never be closed. And there are some conversations that don't ever need to happen. And I had a very trusted therapist share that with me, Mike Foster. He's got a ministry and does all kinds of great things. But one of the things he said to me, because I was dealing with guilt, with how did I allow myself to be so taken over, and I should have been smarter than that. I should have seen it. And one of the things he said to me that caused such freedom is that the same door you open, Lana, you have the ability to close. He said this, it goes both ways. If you opened the door and what came out, it wasn't what you wanted, you have the ability to close it. And then you get to open. You are in control. So I think that's what, from that particular message, that I think really resonated with me, is that there are some scenarios, there are some situations that you're never going to be able to just kind of seal and it's going to feel good. It's always going to be a little bit yuck, but that you have the ability to shut the door as well as you opened it.
That was very helpful for me. Lana shared that with me a year or so ago when she learned that principle. That was hugely helpful to me because I'm a person who likes closure. I like things to get wrapped up, put a bow on it, or at least a knot in it. And so, okay, I'm done with that. I've had a conversation with this person. We've finalized it. We've closed it. I've forgiven. They've forgiven. I've apologized. They accepted it, or they apologized, and I gave, forgiveness or granted that. But sometimes there are relationships that are open-ended. You never have the final conversation. The person passes away before you can ever deal with it. They move away and they break the relationship, and you end up with this place of just like, what do I do?
And you can create your closure.
You've got to create your own closure.
You can create it.
And the other part of that door going both ways, going back to the man who was at the pool, blaming all the stuff around him. I'm a victim. Basically, I can't be healed because I'm a victim. The angel, the friends, the lack of friends, the angel, it's all these things outside of me. It was very helpful for me when Lana and I began to process that the door goes both ways. Listen, just because you open a door and allow someone to come in doesn't mean they stay in. All right? You might open the door and let a person come into your life, let them come into an intimate place in your life and realize you made a mistake. all right? It doesn't mean you stop loving them. It doesn't mean that you stop granting forgiveness or so, but you can forgive someone and not necessarily trust someone. You can forgive someone, but not necessarily allow them to be in an intimate place in your life. Talk a little bit about the rooms of a house, and that some people need to be outside, inside, etc. That was very helpful to me too.
Yes, if you think about a home, and so let's think about the landscaping of a home. And so you've got your house, and in your house you have all of these rooms. You've got a living room, you've got the kitchen, and you have your bedroom. You have on the front porch, let's say you've got that area, and then you've got maybe a walkway that goes in front of your house. And so the way Mike attributed it is that what happens in your bedroom, that's the most intimate place in your home. That's where you have conversations. That's where you have connection that you don't want anyone else to hear. It's where it's the privacy between you and that person that is closest to you. And so then you've got your living room. Well, the folks that get into your living room are people that you've invited to your home. You know, maybe they're coming to have dinner that somebody has cooked, and not me, but somebody else has cooked, and you're going to share a meal with them. There's intimacy there. There are some people that you just allow on the porch. They knock on the door and you're like, I'm not letting you in my house. I don't know, you're kind of weird, you know. And then there are some people that you don't even want into the perimeter of your home. And the way that he shared it is that there are people that it is absolutely okay that you attribute them to being in the walkway, some people in the porch, some people in the living room, and then those people that you know you can trust is in that intimate part of your home, in your bedroom. Well, what some of us have done is we've allowed the wrong people in the bedroom. We've allowed the wrong people to hear the most intimate part of our lives and the intimate part of our stories. And when you open yourself to that type of intimacy, and then you realize, I let the wrong people in. For someone like me, you feel as if you have allowed all of this unrest that you in and of yourself, you should have had control over. You should have been smarter. You should have realized. And then that's one of the things that he said to me is that you open that door, you allow them in, you can usher them out, and then close the door. So we all have the power to do those things. But it's important for us to realize not every person that we meet belongs in our bedroom. Not every person that we meet even belongs in our living room having dinner. And that's okay. For us as pastors that we've given our entire lives to ministry and to serve others has been the most difficult lesson for me, because I'm like, you want to come to the bedroom? Yeah, have at it. Jump on the bed with me. All right, we'll talk. You know, and it's been difficult for me to close and realize those sections that aren't necessarily for that it means that I'm a bad pastor. It means that I'm taking care of myself.
That was extremely freeing to me, because I needed permission to actually have some walls in my life. You know, I'm a person who's always talking about tear walls down, you know, expand the table, let everybody sit there, and all that's still true. It has nothing to do with not loving people or, you know, choosing some people to love and other people not. For me, for a long time, I lived kind of without some walls, and I let people who should have remained in the living room into the bedroom, and they should have stayed at the kitchen table, but they didn't, and I allowed them in. And it's when you get in, that's when a lot of pain and hurt happens.
And I think it's really important. I think it's really important that we say, those folks did nothing wrong.
No. It has to do with you and personality and where you are in life.
I mean, there are people that wreak havoc in your life. I mean, we know that.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, it was the decisions that I made that were unwise. Mm-hmm. Okay, moving on to part 3, where light shines through. This is last week with scars. And I thought that was great that you kind of talked about the fact that you don't scar well.
Yeah.
You know, that some people, you know, they scar great. And you know, you don't even see that scar, and they're just so proud. But with others, they scar in a way that everybody can see that.
Yeah. Jagged, ugly scars.
Yeah. And so what makes it difficult, you know, when we place our faith in Jesus and that we are trusting him with those deep, painful wounds. And at the same time, what you shared that I thought I'd never heard this concept. So it was great when you shared things I've just absolutely never heard or thought of before. Good job. High five.
Okay.
Is that
it's a very
you
rare thing.
said that you could be both wounded, deeply in pain, but resurrected at the same
Right,
time.
exactly.
That was so powerful to me.
Yeah.
So kind of talk to us what that means. And
Yeah, that comes from the idea of when Jesus was resurrected and appeared to his disciples after the resurrection. Thomas did not, he said, I will not believe until I see the wounds, until I feel the scars. And Jesus knew that. So when he appeared to Thomas, he said, touch my hands, put your finger in my side, feel the wounds, see the scars. And I just gave a quote from Richard Rohr last week, and I read this a year or so ago, and it just so resonated with me. And he was saying that the lesson in that story of Thomas is not just about doubting and needing empirical evidence. It's not as much about that as it is that a person can be wounded and resurrected at the exact same time. So Jesus came out of the tomb resurrected, but he still had the wounds. We are wounded, resurrected people. So many of us have these deep scars, these deep wounds, but we're also followers of Jesus. And we are confused because we wonder, how is it that we can be a child of God? Our band just sang it a few minutes ago. I am the righteousness of God. It's done. The beautiful song, the great song, the holy water song, all the forgiveness, all that's true. But then we still feel all these wounds that we've collected throughout our life. Is it possible to be both? Yes, it's possible to be both. So we will carry these scars with us probably the rest of our lives, but we're also resurrected. So it's just a concept that I think is beautiful.
And what you encouraged us to do, and to be very bold about revealing our scars. Mm-hmm. And that was a big part of what that message was last week. But I'm going to tell you, for a lot of people, they don't want to show their scars. They're embarrassed because they are, and if we talk about our spiritual, our mental, emotional, they are jagged, ugly, not seamless. Yep. And so what would you encourage that they do with those? Or would you encourage those people to reveal their scars?
It is a process. I would never want someone to reveal their scars to someone. Now, when we're talking about scars, we're not necessarily talking about the physical scars. I'm not saying go around and go, oh, see my scar, and show me the scar.
I said emotional.
It's emotional wounds. It's stories that you've endured. It's stories that you've gone through or that you've had. It's things that have occurred. It's a process, folks. It is for some of us, it's too early to say the things that have happened to us. We're just not there yet. Others of us, we are, and we're just a little intimidated. We're just a little fearful. We need to step across that fence, step across that line, do it anyway. So there's no one answer to every person. But my hope is that you're moving toward becoming more transparent, not away from being more transparent. I think that as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus, we ought to, over time, become more transparent, more honest, more revealing, not less. So if we're becoming more covering, more mask wearing, more, we would never attribute lying, but that's the truth. We're lying by acting as if we've got things together when we don't. If that is the walk, if that's the trajectory of our life, is becoming more covered, more mask wearing, then something's wrong with our quote-unquote religion, because we ought to become more and more revealing, more and more transparent. So, the body of Christ is functioning at best when the people making up the body of Christ in that local church reveals more of their scars, reveals more of their weaknesses, not less. A lot of church cultures, and I'm not saying we've got it figured out, because we don't. We're a long way from it. But a lot of church cultures encourage covering. They encourage mask wearing. They encourage faking. We've got to get away from that. That, to me, it's rust inside the machine.
So the basis of what you're saying, when you're saying reveal my scars, are basically encouraging me to be more transparent with my life, to be more open with my story.
Yeah, most people aren't transformed by your success stories. Most people are transformed by your failure stories.
We connect
we do.
when we talk about the areas of struggle.
Yep.
You can be impressed from afar by all the things that I've accomplished, but we will connect when we start sharing about the things that made us human, that made us realize that we didn't have it all figured out, that we were headed down this road. And all of a sudden, it was a tremendous accident that caused me to go a different way, and to be able to share that those are the things that make us human.
Yeah, I remember hearing a few years ago at a conference or a book, something I was reading or listening to, and the guy was a very successful business person, and he was in his 60s, I think it was, maybe even his early 70s. And in his 50s, he had a major financial train wreck, and I think his marriage imploded and lost money, and just, it was terrible. And somebody in the audience or in the book was asking him, you know, if you could go back and, you know, do things differently or whatever, what's one thing? And he said if he could change one thing about his life as it relates to his business and marriage and all that, is he wishes he would have had his train wreck in his 20s. And I thought, boy, that's so true. It's the failure, it's the implosion, it's the crash. That's where you start really learning. Unfortunately, some of us, it happens in our 50s because we never learned from our 20s, 30s, and 40s. So if we could somehow get back, you know, and have it early and learn from it, you know, I look back at the books I've read and the people I've met, you know, classes I've taken, and all the good things. I've learned a lot, but nothing compares to the things I've learned when I have fallen flat on my face and busted my nose. That are some lessons I've learned. That's changed my life.
Because you don't want to go back and do that again. And so I often think it's the evaluated, it's not just the bad thing that happens to us, it's how we responded and how we evaluated that situation that we learned for. We didn't just stay stuck, but that we were able to choose lessons that we were able to learn.
Yep, very good.
I think we have some time for some questions.
Yeah, Bill, you have a question?
Let's see, there we go. So I'm going to ask one actually, well, just to warm it up a little, because I have one. You had, you made a couple points there. The first one, when we were back in part 2, you were talking about the house with the doors and the bedroom and all that stuff. And then as we transitioned to talking about part 3 and showing your scars, I want to talk about the two together, because I think sometimes sharing our scars feels like letting people in the bedroom. And I wonder, how do you square that? What do you think about how the two of those intersect, and like, when do you show the scar, and how prepared are people to hear what you're saying? Because sometimes the scar can come out kind of ugly, and then I'll look for people.
It's such a good question. I'm going to let Lana answer it. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. As he was talking, the first thing came to my mind is that not everyone has earned the right to hear your story.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't mean that they're not worthy of hearing your story. No. What it means is that there is a relationship that has been formed that gives them the right to hear your story, for you to be able to show your scars. You know, if there is a scar on your body in a very intimate place, you're not just going to show it to anybody. You know, I wouldn't encourage you to start taking your clothes off and showing scars to anybody, but in a spiritual concept is that that's the first thing that kind of came to my mind as he was talking, is that not everyone has earned that right. How do you earn that right? How do you get to be a person that hears another person's story? You know, I think that's some of the things is that we have to evaluate with our relationships, but it is that we spend time with them, that we know them. You know, there's a lot of times that, you know, I've served in leadership my entire career. Right when I graduated from college, I was put in a supervisory position. And one of the bosses that I had said to me, you know, I thought that I was creating this environment for these folks that I was leading that was so positive. And I was like just the Mary Poppins cheerleader. And, you know, if they made mistakes, I would go fix their mistakes. They didn't even have to fix their mistakes. I would fix their mistakes, you know, and things like that. But nobody wants a 22-year-old who has this much of experience telling them how to fix their mistake when they've been working in a field for 10 years. I had not earned the right to fix their mistake. And so I think a lot of it is just real self-awareness in knowing who to open that door up to.
Yeah, you've got to kind of test it a little bit too, you know, and you're going to mess up. I mean, when I say become transparent, I'm glad you brought this question up, Bill, because I don't mean that you go around and just overshare and tell everybody your most intimate problems and struggles, sometimes that creates a lot more pain. And I'm going to tell you, you know this, your failures, your mistakes, let's assume that maybe your biggest mistake is a marriage that fell apart and you're filled with regret, you're filled with guilt and all the kind of thing. I wish I would have been a better husband. I wish I'd have been a better father. And then you go, that's a very sacred thing to you. It's filled with pain and hurt. You could share that with someone and they don't see it sacred at all. And it can be very devastating, very hurtful to you when you begin to open up and share and then they don't receive it as you hope that they will. So sometimes you've got to let a relationship mature and build and watch some trust and begin to share a little and then share a little more and then share a little more. And then you'll hopefully, through wisdom and experience, you'll know when to stop sharing. Maybe it's too much, or you can go all the way in and share. Yeah, carefully transparent. That's right.
Real quick before we get done. Okay, we got time for one more.
All right. Yeah, when you talk about the falling on your face, busting your nose, that kind of thing, there are it's like the song we started with. I'm on my knees again. I need your forgiveness. I need your help. Can you speak a little bit to the fact that when you do things like that, there are still consequences that have to be paid? That it's not going to be a clean wash when he says, "I'm here, come to me." There are still consequences that go with it.
Yeah, in fact, we talked a little bit about that in one of the messages. I don't remember which one it was. That it's why every decision you make matters, because it can start a ripple effect and it's now out of your hands. I remember reading again years ago. I was in my 20s when I read this illustration, and this happened years ago, back in the 1800s, I think it was. This minister of a particular district, older man, had a younger minister training underneath him, and this younger minister had heard some gossip in the church, and he had spread it around. Instead of stomping it down, he spread it around, and he began to feel very guilty about talking and sharing that intimate information with other people in their little community. And he went to the older minister and said, I'm so sorry that I did that, and please pray for me and help me to not gossip, and what do I do now? And he gave him an illustration. He said, come inside, and he brought him inside. He took a feather pillow and he cut open one end of the feather pillow, and he told him to go out on the back porch and shake the feather pillow out. And he did. He shook it out, and the wind caught the feathers and blew them all over the field, and they went into the trees and everything. And he said, that's your lesson. And he said, what lesson is that? He said, I want you to go out and pick up all those feathers and put them back into the pillow. He said, and when you do that, you'll be able to collect all your words. Because once it gets out, it's no longer according to your will. It now is in other people's wills, and they can do with it what they want. So decisions we make have a ripple effect that's beyond us now. If we do things, Roy asked a great question. We fall down, we bust our nose, we make some terrible decision. It's not contained with just you now. If you made a bad decision business-wise and 3 or 4 people had to be terminated because of your decisions, well, they've lost their jobs. Now you can, I'm sorry, and I should have learned, and that's fine, that's good, you need to learn. But now they still have the going on effects of what you did. You mess up a marriage, the kids have some effects of that it's out of your control now. On and on it goes. We know that. You drink and drive, you hurt another family. You can apologize and weep and even serve time and pay fines and all the things that go with it, but the other people who receive the injuries, you've now passed on your decisions. So some consequences you actually may reap for generations to come. And grace is there, forgiveness is there, love is there. None of that changes. You are forgiven, you are loved, you are restored, you are a child of God, on and on. But you have created a ripple effect that can go on forever almost.
There are things that we say and things that we do that once they're done, once they're said, they can never be brought back.
Never. Yeah.
And from that point forward, we manage.
Yeah.
We manage what those were. how much better for us if we would have just been hesitant and slow to speak and slow to move and slow to do and to surround ourselves. Reminds me, again, back with the transparency, and to just find those folks that will help you make those decisions so that, and a lot of times we make those decisions and we say those things when we're at our most desperate, at our most unhealthy, and just to be able to have folks around us who will rally to protect us.
Yeah, we're going to wrap this up because we got to let you go. I hope this has been helpful to you and encouraging to you, and you've learned a few things. I want to speak one more thing that goes along with that question Roy gave. There are many of you gathered here who have lessons you've learned as a result of what you've done. And you say, I wish I could go back and talk to that 16-year-old me. I wish I could go back to that 20-year-old me or that 15-year-old me or whatever. You can't do that, okay? We know that. But you do have an opportunity to do that to other 16-year-olds. You do have the opportunity to speak to other 10-year-olds, 15-year-olds. And we provide that right here. You know, and you say, well, I don't know how to teach teenagers, or I don't know how to. Well, hey, let me ask you a question. Did you make mistakes when you were 15? And if you could go back and do it again, you wouldn't do what you did at 15? Okay, can you share that with another 15-year-old? Could you share that like in a small group setting with other middle school students or high school students and say, hey, when I was a freshman in school, here's what I did. And boy, if I could go back and do it again, I'd do it differently. I'm sure there are a few landmines you've stepped on throughout your life that if you could go back, you would avoid. Could you share that with another one? Say, hey, I can't go back to me, but I'm going to tell you what, you're 18 years old. Man, when I was 18, I did this, this, and this. And if I could do it again, I wouldn't do this, this, and this. That one wisdom, that one piece of truth, that one piece of knowledge could change the direction of an 18-year-old. So that's the body of Christ coming together, the collective wisdom, the collective knowledge, helping one another become who it is we're called to be. All right, let me pray, and we're going to let you go. Father, what an incredible series this has been. Not necessarily because of what I've given or I've shared, but because of the people that have been brought into this place who have listened and learned. Father, we have a lot of pain represented in our church, rippling across our city and our area. And we have people in need of hope. They need hope. We all need hope. But it's not just a feeling. We need more than chill bumps. We need more than a song that makes us feel good. We need more than a moment of hope. We need a hope that lasts, a hope that endures, a hope that will get us up on Monday, a hope that will take us through the weekend, a hope that will cause our fathers to be true fathers to their kids, a hope that will cause moms to be the best mother they can be, a hope that will cause our students to make different decisions in their life than many of us did when we were their age, a hope that changes our lives and the lives of other people. Father, instill that within us. May we run to you as the man who was sitting at the pool. May we avoid all the myths and legends, and may we look directly into your eyes and ask you for help. We cannot do it. We cannot do it on our own, but with you, all things are possible. Speak into our church, speak into our kids, our students, our moms and dads, our people who've gone through divorce, our singles, our college age, on and on it goes, all across this church. Speak truth and set us free. Thank you for loving us. We ask these things in the name of Jesus. Amen.